Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Thursday, May 23rd, 2013. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Manny is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, managing the Truth Warp Drive, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A couple of quick program notes. As you know, we're coming up on the holiday weekend, and I just wanted to let you know RBN will be broadcasting live tomorrow and also on Monday, on Memorial Day. So if you're in between your hot dogs and your beer and the rest of it, you might want to tune in, and we'll be talking with a bunch of people. Richard Mack is, of course, scheduled for Monday in our third hour. Now, Richard and I had forgotten it was Memorial Day when we set this up, so we're trying to basically confirm with him, or we may slide it 1 day or 2 days later in the week here. I finally got back in touch with Cindy Sheehan, and it turns out that on Monday, they were dodging tornadoes, because as you know, Cindy and her people are doing the Tour de Peace, riding bicycles across the country. They started in Santa Monica, and they are in Tornado Alley right now, and apparently on Monday they were dodging weather, and that was why basically they were not able to communicate. She will be joining us again on Tuesday at the very end of our show, starting about a half hour. We'll have the last half hour of the show will be Cindy Sheehan and the Tour de Peace. So we're back in touch with her, and again, oh gosh darn tornadoes and the rest of that whole thing going on. Now, as you probably already know, yesterday in London there was this supposed terror attack. And it's already sparked riots by anti-Muslim fanatics in that area of London. But it's already starting to look like this is just another fake. And as they do more of these fakes, they're not even doing them very well. And there are already a couple of major problems have surfaced with this one. I mean, to give you the backstory on it, supposedly this Muslim gentleman killed this soldier who had served in the Mideast, chopped his head off, was screaming, Allah, eye for an eye, basically stood around being videotaped on this whole situation and literally waiting until the police showed up to arrest and take them away. And originally we were told the suspects were killed, and they said, no, they're alive and in the hospital, and blah, blah, blah. Two major problems have already surfaced regarding the story. The first is that there was more than one camera supposedly videotaping this guy's rant. And in one of the videos, his hands appear clean, just hands, and in the other, they look like they're covered with blood, although it's a very smooth, uniform red coloring, whether it was put in after the fact with post-processing, visual effects, or not. But the two videos are directly contradictory. But by far the largest problem with this story, when they're showing the video of the victim lying on the road who supposedly has been beheaded with this meat cleaver or whatever else was used here, and there is no visible blood at all. And the reason this is a problem is very simple. When you die from a head injury, and obviously beheading is a head injury, your heart does not stop beating. It goes right on beating. This is why head injuries, like motorcycle accidents, are the best source for heart transplant material. Because the rest of your body is still doing what it's doing. It's just your brain that's gone. And if you remember the French Revolution, they would pile heaps of straw under the guillotines, because after they would take off the head, the heart would keep pumping and the blood would pour out of the neck until there was so little blood left in the body the heart would starve. So there should be just all kinds of blood around this body, not a drop. This is another hoax. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about this latest, what appears to be another hoax terror attack to get us all hating those gosh darn evil Muslims. And as I was pointing out before we went to the commercial break, The giveaway here is the absence of blood. Supposedly this victim, who was a soldier who served over in the war against those gosh darn Arab Muslims who live over our oil, has supposedly been beheaded and severely lacerated about the head and neck area. Now, when you die from a head injury or anywhere around that part of your body, your heart continues to beat until the majority of the blood in the body leaves the body through the wound and the heart starves. And as I was saying before we went to the show, if you go back and you study the history of the French Revolution, they would pile heaps of straw around the base of the guillotine, because after that blade fell, the body's blood would just pour out of the neck until the heart starved. And so if this guy was really beheaded, there should be a huge pool of blood, almost the entire content of the body's blood pooled around the injury, and it's just not there in the video. Now, somebody, a very sharp-eyed listener, just wrote in and pointed out something else we should be aware of. If you look at the close-up of the man doing the rant about Allah, an eye for an eye, he's wearing a gold ring. And devout Muslims do not wear gold. It is prohibited. And also, Muslims, devout Muslims, do not wear a wedding ring. Their philosophy is the wedding is based on the relationship between the man and the woman, and it's not enshrined in a ring so that the ring may be taken off and put the marriage on hold, which a lot of guys who are catching some on the side like to do. So already, this guy who's out there ranting about eye for an eye and everything, he's a fake. He's not a devout Muslim. Just like we found out the so-called devout Muslim that led the attack on 9/11. Turned out he was living with a stripper and they were going to bars and all this other un-Islamic behavior. It's just a fraud. It's another hoax here. Now, over in Sandy Hook, a lot of people's eyebrows shot up into the hairline, or into the bald, over this recent change to the laws in Connecticut that allow photographs of the crime scene of Sandy Hook to be withheld, supposedly over privacy concerns of the family. And when asked about it, the chief Connecticut attorney literally came out and said that the independent media, the truthers, have changed the landscape regarding the Freedom of Information Act, because too many people are taking the information that is released under Freedom of Information requests and they're examining it for contradictions and problems. And this was his reason for blocking release of the Sandy Hook details. He's basically come out and said, if we release the actual facts, those gosh darn bloggers and independent media and those gosh darn truthers, they'll just start tearing apart the story. Yeah, we will. That's what we do. That's our job. To be a watchdog on the abuses of government, which abuses, of course, includes lying to us. We've already caught him on so many lies about this whole Sandy Hook situation. The long gun being the most obvious one of that. Attempting to claim that Adam Lanza was not on antidepressants. Nobody said he was on antidepressants. He was on Fanapt. Completely different medication. So everybody's saying, we want to see the crime scene photos, we want to see the facts and judge for ourselves. And the Connecticut chief attorney said, no, you'll just cause trouble for us. Yeah, we will. And you might as well just glue a flashing neon sign to your forehead saying, guilty, 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 by going on out there and saying, no, 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 you can't have the facts and the evidence here. Just accept what we tell you and believe, and all shall be well. I don't think so. Now, a lot of people, of course, are still talking about how Lois Lerner took the Fifth Amendment, testifying before the House committee as to just what the heck was going on with the Internal Revenue Service. And it's getting to be a very, very interesting debate, because she basically came up and said, I did nothing wrong, I've committed no crime, and I'm not going to say anything more. And I don't know, maybe we ought to just get out one of those water boards here, because, any Arab with a cheap Casio wristwatch, terror suspect, constitutional rights don't apply, waterboard him until he says something we can put in the newspaper. Obviously, Americans, by and large, are far more terrorized by the Internal Revenue Service than they are by the Arab with the cheap Casio wristwatch, so I don't know why we're seeing this double standard out there. But it's interesting, the House committee is taking the position that because because Lois Lerner answered earlier questions to the Inspector General, and because she did testify under oath before that House committee, that she has automatically waived her right to the Fifth Amendment. You can't start being honest and saying what's going on and then say all of a sudden, at least that's their argument. I think it's a very gray area, and they basically dismiss the witness until they can get a firm ruling on at what point you can be construed as having waived your Fifth Amendment rights. I don't think it really matters. At this point, the damage is done. The instant she said, I refuse to answer, and invoked her Fifth Amendment rights, all of America lit up and said, aha, we got ourselves another cover-up. Last word coming out is they're talking about an immunity deal for her. So once they grant immunity, the Fifth Amendment no longer applies, because you're not incriminating yourself if you're immunized. You have to testify, or you face contempt of Congress and various other potential consequences. So they may immunize her to remove that Fifth Amendment protection. She won't need it. She's not going to go to jail. And there's therefore no more reason for her to invoke the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Of course, if she's out there invoking the Fifth Amendment to protect other parties, that is a whole different kettle of GMO fish out there. A lot of people are really putting a lot of scrutiny on the Internal Revenue Service right now. And basically, everybody's going back and looking at its history and realizing it's always been a political weapon. That was part of what got Richard Nixon in trouble. Whatever party or official is in power, they have felt they can use the IRS as a weapon. And that's not what it is supposed to exist for, but that's what it's being used at. The other reason people are putting more scrutiny on the Internal Revenue Service is its rulings and declarations are always hideously overcomplicated, obfuscated, so you really can't follow back through to what's going on. This is where all that confusion of show us a law that actually says wage and salary earners are taxable under the income tax. Because income is defined as profit from corporate activity. If you own your labor and you trade it for wages and salary, there is no profit. It's an even swap. And the IRS tries to muddy the waters with all these complicated, obfuscated rulings and declarations here. And, of course, another reason people are very, very concerned about what the IRS has been doing is it is now Obamacare's enforcement mechanism. And people are wondering if, you vote for the wrong party, if you will be denied medical care that you absolutely need. And, yeah, after seeing what the Internal Revenue Service has been doing to conservative groups and the independent media and the Tea Party and the Occupy, yeah, the idea that your medical care choices have been taken away from you and given to an agency that very obviously, provably, habitually, historically bases its decisions on political consideration. How Soviet Union can you get? Now, Karl Rove is getting out there and starting to rouse the rabble, and he's homing in on Benghazi. More and more information is surfacing about Benghazi. The lies, provably, people are lying and covering up. There's something being hidden. They're still towing the official line that this was some kind of a terrorist attack, and I don't think so. Everything I have seen to date reaffirms, or reinforces rather, my theory that it was a staged October surprise stunt to help Obama win re-election, and it got out of control and went horribly wrong, and everybody's trying to cover it up from that. New whistleblowers have come out to basically say what was going on in Benghazi at that consulate had nothing to do with diplomacy and everything to do with funneling weapons from Libya into the Syrian rebels. And so they're covering that up as well. Now, a little bit of a weird situation going on with Boston. It's getting a little weird out there. As you're probably already aware, earlier this week, there was this gentleman down in Florida that the FBI interviewed, no problem. Then the FBI went out to talk to him again at midnight, and somehow this witness got shot and killed. And now that he is dead and cannot answer for himself, they're saying he is the link between the Tsarnaev brothers and this triple murder involving drugs that they're trying to tarnish the Tsarnaev brothers with to so villainize them that people stop looking at the inconsistencies in the official story. And now we're getting word, 2 of the FBI agents, not 1, but 2 of the agents involved in Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's arrest have fallen out of a helicopter and died. Supposedly it was some kind of a deployment training mission, and these 2 guys were on ropes, and because of an unspecified mechanical failure, is the official term, both ropes let go and these 2 FBI agents fell to the ground and died. That one just is way beyond belief on that one. We're going to take a break for some commercials. We'll be back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And His Highnessness Lord Obama is on the corporate media right now, basically trying to rationalize the continuation of drone strikes, supporting the Afghanistan effort until 2014, and basically he's trying to resell the same agenda. And what we're seeing here is, I think, Obama has come to understand that Triplegate has severely damaged his public approval. And, of course, that means nobody in Congress wants to ride his coattails any longer, and that means congressional approval for his agenda is about to go in the Al-Qaeda. And we've seen a couple of things over the last few days where Obama is out there urging employers to pay workers higher wages. Doesn't actually accomplish anything. It's just there to make Obama look good. And now he's talking about, yes, we're going to allow some of the Guantanamo detainees to be transferred back to their country of origin. And again, he's not actually doing it. He's just talking about it. And so Obama, I think it finally broke through to him. He is in trouble. The American people the American people really haven't been supporting him all that well for a while. But now the opposition is breaking into the open, and that is affecting the Congress. So he's out there trying to repair his public image, and I think we'd probably get more facts and truth if we went over to the science fiction channel here. Just heard back from Sheriff Richard Mack confirming, yes, he will be on the air in our 3rd hour on Monday, so that will be a good thing for us to look forward to. So, we're talking about the aftermath of Boston and the attempt to demonize the Tsarnaev brothers by just piling on all these other accusations. There was this triple murder supposedly involving drugs some years ago where one of the murder victims was just an acquaintance of Tamerlan Tsarnaev. They were friends. There is no other connection, but they're trying to say, oh, yes, they were connected to the murder, and this guy in Florida was the link between them, and now that he's conveniently dead and can't speak for himself, that's the new sales pitch, to demonize the Tsarnaev so that people don't look at all those other little inconsistencies in Boston and smell a big, giant USDA choice government rat in the middle of all of this. Remember the anthrax letters that were sent right after 9/11, and the letters were made to look like they'd come from Arab Muslims, and the FBI went after Stephen Hatfill, and then they went after Dr. Ayad Assam, and then finally they settled on Bruce Ivins, who was conveniently suicided, and the FBI said, oh yeah, he was it, case closed, we don't have to go any further than that. And meanwhile, of course, the one guy actually caught going into the U.S. government lab where that strain of anthrax originated, Dr. Philip Zach, nobody looked at him, and they just scooted him out. I think he's out at Dugway now. So all of a sudden we got FBI agents falling out of the sky, just like we had all those SEAL team members who were part of that operation that killed some old guy we were told was Osama bin Laden, and now they're all dead. Obama's cleaning house, it looks like to me. Now, a little bit of a flashback. We have this link to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com because we were talking about it yesterday. Kent State, at the height of the growing opposition to the ongoing war in Vietnam, there was this horrible shooting at Kent State where the National Guard fired 67 rounds into a group of protesters, killing 4 unarmed protesting college students. And at the time it was said, oh, the protesters, they shot at the National Guard. The National Guard had to defend themselves. And you anti-war protesters, you ought to think very carefully about getting out in a crowd of protesters from now on. Didn't work. The backlash from Kent State only made the anti-war movement that much stronger. And it has since come out The whole thing was set up. A known FBI informant apparently fired a starting pistol in order to give the National Guard an excuse to shoot into the protesters. And this is the way the government plays these things, and this is why I am absolutely adamant about this Adam Kokesh march going into Washington, D.C. It is a setup. It's an absolute classic setup. By the way, we're up to about 400 signatures on my online petition. We're trying to basically make pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment websites and groups around the country aware of this. We just want to get as many signatures on. We need to get more signatures on this petition than Adam Kokesh has marchers. And we're not telling Adam not to do it. We're not telling people who are convinced it's a good idea not to go. The goal of my anti-Kokesh petition is to destroy the possibility that if something bad happens on July 4th, that the government will say it represents all gun owners and all Second Amendment supporters across the country to justify suspending the Second Amendment and to justify gun confiscation. And so all this petition is, it doesn't do a thing about Adam Kokesh and his march. All the petition does is give an opportunity for gun owners and Second Amendment supporters to stand up and say, I support gun ownership and the Second Amendment, but I am not part of Adam Kokesh and what his people are doing. They do not represent me. They do not represent the vast majority of legal gun owners and Second Amendment supporters. We need to get that message out there so that if something unfortunate happens on July 4th, the government can't claim it is proof that all gun owners are raving, dangerous, violent kooks. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha and welcome back to the show. And His Highnessness Lord Obama is still on the TV. Now he's trying to basically justify why it's okay for him to order the murder via drone of U.S. citizens. He's now admitted that at least 4 American citizens, supposedly protected by the Bill of Rights, were just extrajudicially killed by his drone orders. And you say, these are bad people. They're bad. When you're a terror suspect, you don't warrant, you shouldn't be protected by the Bill of Rights if you're a terror suspect. And he's trying to sell that one. I don't think he's getting a lot of traction because he's spending way too much time on this. Because you need to remember, there are 2 things to keep in mind about these drone strikes. Actually, 3 things. First of all, the drones are being sent into countries with which we are not actually at war. Second, the people targeted by these drones have not had their trial, have not had evidence of guilt of any wrongdoing against the United States presented, certainly not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. We know, it's been admitted now, that both the Bush and Obama administrations know most of the people in Guantanamo are actually innocent of any wrongdoing. But they don't want to let them out because it would be a huge political embarrassment. Oh, you mean we've been torturing innocent people? How could that happen? It was the other administration that did it, and we are just as shocked as you are. Blah, blah, blah. The old Potomac 2-step. And, of course, the third thing is for every one of these drone strikes that are carried out, an average of 50 innocent bystanders are killed. Now, over in Syria, things are getting rather interesting. The United States position, and this is a story we're getting out of antiwar.com, which, by the way, is now suing the FBI over their surveillance and harassment that's been going on over there. The U.S. is now saying they're willing to allow Assad to stay in power in Syria in order to avoid a wider regional war. In other words, the United States seems to have gotten the message from Russia that if they go into Syria or Iran, Russia said, we'll turn it into the new Vietnam and will wear you down in a war of attrition, which Russia has the resources to do, and the United States does not. So the U.S. just blinked here a little bit. Of course, that's not going to change Israel's agenda. Israel doesn't care if more wars fought for Israel by the U.S. destroys the United States. They're already hopping over the border into Canada. Canada's the new parasite. Canada's the new proxy army, the new proxy banking center for Israel's operations here. An Israeli military commander went public saying that should Assad fall, should he be driven from power, Israel will invade Syria. Now, up until now, we've all been told that this is all about freeing the Syrian people from the evil tyrant Assad. But if Assad goes and Israel invades, which they're kind of already doing, it proves that it was never about Assad. It is Syria itself Israel is coveting. We already know Israeli forces are inside Syria across the Golan. We know Israel's just bombing Syria on a regular basis now. And we are getting a report from Syria News that the Syrian Navy has detected and sunk an Israeli submarine just 1 mile off their coast in what appeared to be some kind of an intelligence gathering operation. Now, 1 mile from the coast is inside Syria's territorial waters. And if you're in there with a military vessel, which a submarine is, and they detect it, yeah, you're going to get shot at. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is out there with a very interesting quote saying Jewish influence on American culture and politics is immense. Immense. Now, the context of this is Biden was speaking to a Jewish group, and he was saying it like it's a positive thing. That even though you're only a tiny percentage of the population, you have overwhelming influence in the United States Congress and all the rest of that. So he was saying it like it was a good thing. And isn't it kind of funny how when Israel supporters say that Israel has all this influence over the United States, it's lauded as a good thing. But if anybody else says Israel has all this influence over the United States, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're a Jew hater, you're... And for the record, I am not an anti-Semite. I'm anti-sphincter. And there is actually a difference here. Because anti-Semitism is hating Jews just because they're Jews. And frankly, I don't care, what you are in your religion. We are dealing with the actions of a government and the individuals within that government, not an entire people. Most of the world's Jewish people do not agree with or support Israel's actions. Most of the world's Muslims do not agree with and support the actions of Al-Qaeda, whoever that actually turns out to be. Most Americans do not agree with and support the actions of the U.S. government. We need to keep that BBL, that big black line, between the actions of the government and that government's population, the ordinary people. And we ought not to blame the ordinary people of a country for the actions of a few sociopaths at the peak of political power. Because there usually is a huge disconnect between the two. Now, the House Foreign Affairs Committee has approved harsh new Iranian sanctions. They're trying to block the gold. They're trying to block the oil. And again, it's the same pattern that we have seen time and time again. Provoke, 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 provoke until you get a response. Declare the response the initiating event and escalate the war. And they're basically trying to sanction all of Iran's oil exports. Hasn't worked so far. Nations are ignoring it. American companies are getting exemptions. And they're trying to close the loophole by which those Europeans are still buying oil from Iran. How dare those Europeans buy oil from people we think they should not buy oil from. Talk about the arrogance of that. The United States Congress, legally, constitutionally, is only able to make decisions on behalf of the United States government, the American people. They may be bad decisions, but that's their purview. The United States Congress does not, in fact, have a legal foundation to tell any other country who to trade with or not trade with. It's bluff and bluster, it is arrogant, and it is inevitably part of that long road into outright war. The United States Senate unanimously passed a resolution committing the United States of America, meaning your kids, to support and protect Israel in the event Israel attacks the Iranian nuclear power station. So this is what the deal, and this is how Israel does these things. Israel's going to go attack Iran, blow up their power station, blow up their medical isotope factory, blow up their industrial applications, all of which Iran is legally allowed to have under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Then when Iran counterattacks, Israel's going to skedaddle back to their little country, and they're going to hide behind American men and American women and let those Americans stop the bullets coming back from Iran, because that's what the Americans are for, really. They're just bullet stoppers. They're not worth at all what our precious Israeli children are worth. And so that's basically what they're setting up to do. And the U.S. Senate just said, yeah, we're fine with that. Go and attack Iran. And then when Iran counterattacks, we'll put our kids in the way. Such a deal. Don't forget, we've got a campaign coming up next year, and, we're going to need your continued financial support. United States Congress, the finest government money can buy. And unfortunately, it's not our money who's controlling things here. Meanwhile, down in Arkansas, Representative Tom Cotton introduced legislation at the federal level. This is not an Arkansas law. He's introducing this into the House of Representatives that would automatically punish all family members of anyone who is suspected of violating U.S. sanctions against Iran. Financial punishment, prison sentences up to 20 years. This is introduced as an amendment to the Nuclear Iran Prevention Act of 2013. And basically what Tom Cotton is saying, he wants to punish the family members of any people who are deemed to have violated the U.S. sanctions, including spouses and any relative to the third degree. This means the parents, children, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces, grandparents, great-grandparents, grandkids, and great-grandkids. And he further went on to say there would be no investigation. If the prime malefactor of the family is identified as on the list for sanctions, then everyone within their family would automatically come within the sanctions regime as well. And he explains this away, this return to the Napoleonic Code, by saying, it would be very hard to demonstrate and investigate that these family members were involved. So let's just assume they are all collectively guilty and throw them in prison. It's a terror campaign against Americans. Don't you dare do anything to support Iran. We'll lock you and your entire family away for 20 years. That's what Tom Cotton is saying. None of this, of course, is in compliance with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You do not punish the family for the crimes of the criminal, even if you prove the criminal absolutely guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't go after the spouses. You don't go after the children. You don't go after their parents and aunts and uncles. And yet this is what Tom Cotton is trying to say needs to be done. That kind of hysterical reaction in the House of Representatives, I think, signals they know in Washington, D.C., they are losing this campaign to return to Bretton Woods. They're losing this campaign of dollarification. And they know that they have committed too far to this. They can't turn around and go back. And if they don't succeed, the United States is finished. And the party on the Potomac is over and done with. And all those Congress critters, they're going to have to go out and get real jobs. Their investment portfolios are going to be gone. They're going to have to go out and fix bridges and patch holes in roads. Do something useful for a change. Meanwhile, Iran has started mass producing a domestically produced air defense system. They're not dependent on weapons being sent in from other countries. They've cranked up the mass production line. The factory floor is going, and they're bolstering their air defense system internally. I think that's the reason for this new push for more sanctions. We can't let Iran be able to defend itself from attack. We're the United States of America. We don't attack countries that can fight back. We only attack countries that can't fight back. We'll claim they have weapons of mass destruction to sell the war, but we don't pick on countries that can fight back. That's why they hammered Iraq with sanctions for something like 10 years. People were starving to death in that country. And then once they had starved the country to the point of collapse, they said, yes, we'll attack Iraq, and we'll look heroic, and we'll look victorious. Because we're whooping on an absolutely helpless victim that can't fight back. As Ron White would say, you got to be a real manly man to conduct your wars like that here. Meanwhile, former CIA Director James Woolsey is out there screaming once again that North Korea has an EMP weapon, an electromagnetic pulse, and without any warning they could destroy 70% of the U.S. electric grid and cripple the U.S. defenses. Well, there are two things wrong with that. First of all, U.S. defenses have long ago been hardened against an EMP attack. Second of all, the way you have an EMP attack is you have to fire a nuclear weapon above the Earth's atmosphere over the target. North Korea does not have any rockets that can even come close to doing that. This is your daily dose of U.S. government booga-booga to try and get you to go along with, we've got to conquer North Korea and we've got to open the door to war with China because that gosh darn gold yuan is a threat to the supremacy of our ink and paper. And ink and paper has to always reign over all. They're still trying to push that whole agenda here. Meanwhile, and yes, Obama is still going on it, it's a war on terror, we've got to kill these people. And he's gone on way too long. Which tells us he knows he is losing the war for public opinion on this drone issue. Amnesty International has basically come out blasting the United States for drone strikes, Guantanamo, an absence of all accountability. Gee, you think. Noam Chomsky is out there saying it's time to take Obama before the International Criminal Court. He is a war criminal. And it's kind of hard to argue against that when Obama is sending these robotic killing machines into countries we are not at war with and killing 50 innocent people for every one terror suspect. And remember how people get on that terror suspect list. There's no investigation. There's no CSI. There's no FBI. They're just out there offering reward money for anybody who might be a terror suspect. And people are turning over names of people they don't like because they get cash for it. You're in a little town and you've got a bakery and the guy across the market square has a bakery and the competition is driving down prices. So you go to the United States representative there and you say, that guy who owns the other bakery, I think he's cooking anthrax in the back room. And the U.S. gives you a big chunk of cash. They drone strike that other bakery owner. And now you're the only bakery in town, and you can raise your prices, and you're going to do very well. And there are no checks and balances on any of this stuff. They just need grist for the drone mill. The U.S. gratefully accepts any name at all to keep the machine going, to keep saying, yes, the war on terror is still necessary. And now we know that Obama has been murdering United States citizens in these drone strikes. And I don't care what these guys have done. They are protected by the Bill of Rights. And for Obama to go out and just extrajudicially execute these people, that in and of itself is an impeachable offense because the president is not allowed to simply kill whoever he wants. There is due process that must be followed. No man's life, liberty, or property can be taken by the government without due process. And the president simply saying, go kill that guy, is not due process. And Obama is reeling from all this backlash of world opinion. And so he's decided he's going to fix the problem by taking control of the drone strikes away from the CIA and giving it to the Pentagon. So the drones are still going to fly. And people who may not have done anything wrong at all will be blown up along with 50 innocent people around them. And Obama thinks that because it's now the Pentagon and not the CIA, that this is going to calm everybody down and let us know that things are somehow better. Of course it's not. It doesn't matter which henchman is enforcing the will of the warlord. The crimes continue. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Coming up on the top of the hour, the phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Obama is still on the air, on the corporate media, still desperately trying to polish his public image, still desperately trying to take the media focus off of Benghazi Gate, IRS Gate, DOJ Gate, and he's just announced he's lifting the moratorium. I mentioned this earlier in the show. He is lifting the moratorium on sending some of the Guantanamo detainees back to Yemen where they came from. And he's doing this to try and repair his damaged public image because Guantanamo's been a big, huge black spot on his record. And no, that's not a racist reference. So don't even bother emailing in on that one. But what it does tell us is Obama could have shut down Guantanamo all along any time he wanted to do. Remember, we were talking about 3 weeks ago when Obama was out there saying, oh, yes, it's bad, it's terrible, and I'd really like to shut it down, but golly gee whiz, we're just running into so many difficulties. Guantanamo is a military facility. Obama is the commander-in-chief. He can give the order anytime he wants to shut it down, and the military must comply. And so all this talk about, oh, I really want to shut it down, but I can't. Today's announcement that he's going to send the Yemenite Guantanamo detainees back to Yemen proves to us all he could have shut it down whenever he wanted. Probably they're going to make some kind of a deal with the government of Yemen to keep these guys from talking to the press, which the government of Yemen probably won't be all that enthusiastic of enforcing once they get their people back. But that's what it means when he says, yes, I'm going to start sending these people back to Yemen. It's an admission he could have shut this down any time he wanted to do it. Now, you probably heard recently in the media, both independent and corporate, about this supposed Chinese private Martian colony mission, and thousands of people signed up to go, which, considering conditions here on Earth, sounds rather attractive, actually. Apparently, it turns out this was a scam. This Netherlands-based nonprofit that announced this and was going to supposedly build a colony, and they were raising money to do this. The Chinese media is saying this is just a big, huge scam, and they're angry because so many Chinese people fell for it. Anyway. Alrighty, let's see what else is going. Let's talk about the economy here. As you're probably already aware, I should take a look at the market because the plunge protection team has been doing their thing all morning. And yes, the American markets are back up into the green, but the same cannot be said for the rest of the world markets. How lucky we live in a country where the Federal Reserve can just instantly create $85 billion in instant money every month to shower on Wall Street to keep the stock market high and looking good, and the rest of the world are not allowed to basically do that. They probably are to some extent here. But the Nikkei lost something like 7% last night. The Japanese bonds hit limit down almost as soon as the market opened. So we're seeing red warning flag. Going to take a break for station identification. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And his Obamaness is just now leaving the podium. Over the commercial break, he was trying to sum up by saying that the United States faces dangers far greater than Al-Qaeda. And our determination is not something to be messed with, which basically means Obama understands they've overplayed Al-Qaeda, and too many Americans understand Al-Qaeda was just a fake all along. So get ready for the new supervillain to be unveiled. The 2014 model of supervillain is now on the showroom floor and available at easy terms. And Obama may be determined, but I think he understands the rest of America isn't exactly lining up behind him for more wars of conquest. So, anyway, and now they're going back for the instant replay with the sports analysis. Yes, Obama's... it's just nonsense stuff here. All right, we're talking about the economy. We're talking about how the Nikkei lost more than 7% of its value last night. Chinese stock market down. European markets are down. The only markets that are in the green, and so far that's only 2 of 3, is here in the United States of America. Major drop at the open and being shoved back up again. We've seen the pattern before. It's the plunge protection team. It's Wall Street just pouring money into the Wall Street brokers so they can buy stocks and drive the prices back up again. They can't let the stock market drop because they have been buying stock to artificially run up the prices for so long. They have huge blocks of these stocks on their balance sheets. Any major correction will render most of Wall Street instantly insolvent. So now they're hooked. They can't stop doing this. We're getting into Zimbabwe territory here right now. The reason we're not feeling as much of the effects of inflation out here in the regular nation with real people is because most of that instant newly created money is confined within Wall Street's financial district for them to play with here. But this is a red warning sign. They can't keep this up much longer. Needless to say, with the stock market declines in Asia and Europe, gold and silver prices took a leap upward. So no doubt the Wall Street will start dumping more of these gold future contracts on the commodities markets to try and drive it back down. The whole American financial system is being held together with fraud, with lies, with illusions, with deceptions. There's no real value in there. So, interesting little story. We've been talking about all this quantitative easing and the realization that a lot of this instantly created dollars from the Federal Reserve went to other countries. Something like almost $1 trillion worth of newly created Federal Reserve notes, every one of which is a loan issued at interest for whom the American people are on the hook. And they went to overseas banks. And a lot of people are saying, well, first of all, they asked Ben Bernanke, who got the money? And he's saying, oh, I don't really know. It doesn't really matter, does it? Yeah, it does. A lot of people are saying, why? When our economy is in such trouble? Is the Federal Reserve making inflation worse by pouring out freshly created paper dollars or computer dollars for these foreign banks? And they don't understand what's going on. Well, we do. We know what's going on here. And it goes all the way back to the mortgage-backed security fraud, back in 2008 when it all imploded. Because those fraudulent mortgage bundles were sold not only to American investors, they were sold around the world. Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, Bank of England, Bank of Libya. They don't have to worry about the Bank of Libya anymore. That got bombed out of existence. But what's going on here is they're trying to protect the rest of the world's banks from collapsing because of those credit default swaps sold by Wall Street. When we come back, I'll elucidate further. Aloha, excuse me, and aloha, and welcome back to our show. So we're talking about this revelation that the Federal Reserve, in addition to $85 billion a month given to Wall Street for the so-called buyback of the toxic assets, which is code speak for worthless mortgage-backed security bundles. What they're doing is Wall Street pulled this huge scam back in 2008. The mortgage-backed securities was a huge moneymaker. There was no securitization chain. Everybody was making money off of commissions, and they were becoming insanely rich. And then when it all fell apart, everybody skedaddled with their loot, and the government said, we'll just make the American people pay for this. Siphoning off tax money that should have gone to your schools, roads, hospitals. Quality of life infrastructure was taken and given to buy back these worthless bundles and dump the losses on you, the American people. And now the Federal Reserve every month creates $85 billion out of thin air and gives it to Wall Street and takes back more and more of those toxic assets, those failed mortgage-backed securities. So they're no longer on Wall Street's books, they're technically on your books. And the way they make you pay for all of this is that every time they create another $85 billion in instantly created money to give to the banks, the money in your pocket that you already worked for, earned, saved, is worth less. Your actual purchasing power declines. It's a very covert way of taking wealth from the American people and using it to bolster the banks. But it's not confined to just the United States of America, because these mortgage-backed securities were sold around the world. They were rated AAA by Wall Street's pet rating agencies, who are paid by the issuers of the bonds to rate them. The only rating agency that is paid by the investors, Egan-Jones, said, no, these things are very questionable. Now, of course, the SEC has shut Egan-Jones down. Don't want to spoil the party. And so now, in addition to buying these toxic mortgage-backed securities from American banks and dumping them on the American people, the Federal Reserve is having to buy them back from all those foreign banks and investors who bought them, because it's provably a fraud. And that is why almost $1 trillion has gone from the Federal Reserve to all of these foreign bankers. And Ben Bernanke doesn't want you to know who's getting the money, because then people are going to start making the link between those who are getting the cash today and those who bought those mortgage-backed securities back in 2008. But that's what's going on. Why is the Federal Reserve so concerned about these foreign banks? Well, it's because of those credit default swaps. Wall Street sold billions, trillions of dollars of credit default swaps against debt and banks in other countries. In the case of Europe, the total exposure is something like $90 trillion. That is with a T. Wall Street, those Wall Street firms who sold those credit default swaps do not have the cash reserves to make good on the claims. And that is why the Federal Reserve is impoverishing you to prop up those European banks to make sure they don't collapse. Because the first time one of those banks defaults and collapses, it'll start triggering those credit default swaps sold by Wall Street, and Wall Street's going to be in trouble. They're making you pay for Wall Street's crimes and frauds. And 7,000 Americans have already been arrested for protesting against this Wall Street crime and corruption. Not one of the Wall Street CEOs has even been arrested. And that, too, is a hallmark of a fascist economic dictatorship. Now, over at Covington and Burling, there were a group of protesters protesting over the continuing fraudulent foreclosure scam. And we know this was an epidemic. It was called Foreclosure Gate, where banks were foreclosing on homes that didn't even have mortgages with that bank. In some cases, homes were being foreclosed on that didn't even have a mortgage. They were paid off free and clear. And the reason for that is very simple. In order to stay solvent, these financial institutions needed your property on their balance sheet. That monthly payment you're making was not enough to keep them out of the red. They needed your whole property. They needed that entire equity on their balance sheet. And that was why they went on this firestorm of foreclosures with reckless disregard for law and procedure. They bypassed title transfer taxes with this mortgage electronic registration system, which delinked the notes from the titles and created a huge headache for the court system. But they're still out there taking people's homes because they need that equity on their balance sheet. Whatever the declared value of the home is, they need all of that on their balance sheet to stay out of the red ink. And the government is protecting them. That was the whole point of Obama's foreclosure fraud settlement. They went out to all the 50 states' attorneys generals and said, don't investigate, don't prosecute. We, the federal government, will take care of everything. And they wrist-slapped the Wall Street bankers. And they said there will be a settlement where we will compensate the people whose homes were taken. And the checks that are going out to people whose homes were wrongfully taken are about $300 each. And in some cases, those checks have bounced. This is wealth confiscation to protect the banks, just like Roosevelt did back in 1933 when he took the gold and gave people stacks of ink and paper in exchange for it and said, see, this is just as good. Well, if it's just as good, why did you need the gold? And so you're being looted to prop up criminal bankers. So anyway, there's this foreclosure protesters over at Covington and Burling. It resulted in arrests and tasering. And it's becoming very, very stark. The people who are protesting the criminality of Wall Street are being attacked, arrested, tased, and beaten. The people who committed the criminality are protected. There is no more rule of law when it comes to protecting the banks. It's protect the banks. We don't care about the people. Banks are holy. Banks are sacrosanct. They must be protected. People, we got too many of those already. Now, over at NBC in Chicago, they're reporting on how the federal government has quietly passed a law that erases the statute of limitations on payments owed to the federal government. And the specific context of these is that the federal government, like everybody else, makes mistakes. And sometimes they will pay money to people that are not really entitled to it. And some of those people will pay that money back, and some won't. But there was a statute of limitations. If the government sent you a check for $25,000, After so many years, the government couldn't ask for it back. Well, now they have reversed that. There is no more statute of limitations, and the specific case is the federal government has gone after a woman for overpayment of survivors' benefits from 35 years ago. That is how desperate they are to try and keep their little Ponzi scheme financial system going a little bit longer. They're just looking under couch cushions for spare change. But it's your couch cushions, and it's your spare change they're grabbing. And of course, inevitably continuing along the same path to disaster, Wall Street lobbyists have descended on Capitol Hill, and once again they are loosening the chains of financial regulation, which is what got us into this mess back in 1999 when they repealed Glass-Steagall. And they've gotten these deregulatory bills going through the House of Representatives with surprisingly bipartisan support. Well, it's not surprising. Everybody in Congress has an investment portfolio with investments in these Wall Street firms. So members of Congress are protecting their own wealth by destroying yours. Had decisions by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission that weaken reform legislation, especially with regard to derivatives trades. Derivatives have placed this nation at huge risk. They've placed Wall Street at huge risk. But the people selling these derivatives are making so much money, they want to keep on going. Because the attitude in Wall Street and in Washington, D.C., and indeed even in the people who set up the Federal Reserve itself, I want my money now. When it falls apart, it's going to be after I die. I don't care. It's somebody else's problem. We see that in the House of Representatives. I'm going to do what makes me rich now. When it falls apart after 2 years, I'm going to be out of office. It's not my problem. Every presidential administration does the same thing. I'm going to do what works right now, and if it's going to explode the country 10, 20 years from now, it's not my problem. I'll duck the blame. Somebody else gets the blame for it. Nobody is thinking the long view. Nobody is thinking the overview of what is good for the nation as a whole, both today and in the long run. They're completely in the moment, opportunistic, greedy. They're simply taking advantage of every situation to enrich and empower themselves, and nobody's really thinking, what will this do to the country and its people 10, 15, 20 years from now? And that is probably the biggest single failing of our form of government right now. There's one good thing about royalty. When you had kings, and yes, there would be bad kings and there'd be good kings, but they were stuck with the job for life. Every decision they made, they had to be thinking about 10, 20, 30 years ahead. Not just the next election, not just dump the blame on the next administration. Apparently up in the Bronx, there's been this bus tour through the ghetto saying this is where pickpockets hang out, and apparently they've had to shut it down because the residents are angry. It's called poverty chic. Talk about it a bit more. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still talking about the economy, and speaking of Europe and the rest of the world, a former insider at the World Bank, ex-senior counsel Karen Hughes, says the entire global Western financial system is dominated by a small group of corrupt, power-hungry figures centered around the privately owned U.S. Federal Reserve. I know we talk about the IMF, we talk about the World Bank, we talk about the European Central Bank, but the core of it all is the Federal Reserve, which dominates the world because of Bretton Woods, or did dominate the world. It's seeing its dominance wane as the world peels off and goes into the BRICS, or they start trading their currencies directly without going through the dollar, which is the whole reason for all these wars, to force the world back to Bretton Woods, which allowed the Federal Reserve to rule the world through those pieces of paper and ink. Now, what Karen Hughes is saying probably doesn't come as a shock to anybody. We know that's what's going on. Bankers in charge of the world for the sake of the bankers. And that, too, of course, is fascism right there. When we talk about the blueprint for the new America, our overwhelming principle has to remain that the public currency must be handled as a public utility, not as a private money-making scam for the money junkies. That's why I keep saying, rule number 1, no private central bank. Rule number 2, no private central bank. Rule number 3, no private central bank. Anybody who stands up and says we need to start up a new private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest needs to be tarred and feathered, hanged, drawn, quartered, burned, and the ashes peed on by a rabid dog. Meanwhile, over at the IMF, Christine Lagarde is being formally charged for abusing her position regarding this £270 million fraud and embezzlement scam. Her money junkie behavior has caught up to us. A lot of people are saying, is she being gotten rid of the way her predecessor was, with a scandal because she's not towing the line for the Fourth Reich? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm glad to see her go, because the thing I am most opposed to was her attitude toward the Greek people, that it didn't matter if half the debt Greece is being saddled with came out of crimes, corruption, and fraud by Papandreou and Goldman Sachs. Debt is debt. Debt is sacrosanct, and you will pay it off with your labor and your children's labor. It doesn't matter if it was all fraudulent. You never question debt. Mahi dictum est. All righty, let's see. We've got a caller on the line here. We're going to take Marty in Ohio. Aloha, Marty. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, it's Idaho, but that's okay.
I'm sorry, I missaw that.
Oh, I know. Okay, yeah, I just I sent you an email. You can look it up, but just a heads up before you get a chance to look at freedomsphoenix.com. Adam is in jail. He's being represented by George, Donnelly, I think, from Shield, Mutual, whatever. And you'll have to listen to it, but it's going to be tough for him to even bear an arm once this is over. He was arrested on the marijuana demo thing in Philadelphia.
Yeah, but
that's where he is.
You know, I don't think it's going to go to trial, because I think this is just a publicity stunt to keep his name out there in the independent media or even the corporate media to try and get more people sympathizing with him and marching into Washington, D.C. behind him. I think it's a PR stunt. And I don't think it's going to go to trial. And so...
Well, you mean you don't think he really was arrested?
Oh, he was really arrested, but it's staged. And he'll be let go on some technicality, or there'll be some kind of a plea bargain, you know, and after... it's a PR stunt. And they'll let him off the hook.
Okay, that might happen. But listening to the interview this morning, that's why I couldn't listen to your show the whole time, because I was listening to that. So, yeah, you might want to give it a listen. Whatever.
Well, I'll listen to it, but again, you know, it's just too convenient. It happens just when he's setting up to march, and all of a sudden there's an arrest. Oh, poor Adam, he's being oppressed and framed by the police. We must stand with Adam Kokesh. I'm sorry, not Adam Lanza. We have to stand with Adam Kokesh, and we have to support him, and we have to be in his march. It's a PR campaign. They're selling this guy to us as somebody we're supposed to follow as he marches into Washington, D.C. with loaded weapons. I'm sorry.
Wow, that's a different take on it, and you could be right.
Let me give you an example of how this stuff works. Way back when I was first getting involved with all of this activism and blogging, and of course it was tangled in with the Vincent Foster affair. And at that time, I was still friends with Matt Drudge, who was also just getting started at the time. And I had found evidence within the FBI's own paperwork that they were using fraud to manufacture Lisa Foster's recognition of the gun found with her husband's body. And what the facts were is that Vince Foster had inherited what the FBI described as a silver-colored gun from his father. And, of course, the gun found with the body was dark-blued steel. And the FBI was just twisting her words around in order to say Lisa Foster recognized the gun. And it was a complete fraud. And I took it to Matt Drudge and said, we got him cold. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. When we come back, I'll finish this story, and I'll show you how this stuff really works. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking on the topic of how sometimes when the government is putting forward some kind of a managed propaganda asset, they will intentionally create legal trouble for them as a means of promoting them in the public eye. A very old example would be Lee Harvey Oswald, who, when he was working in New Orleans, got into this staged fight which got him into legal trouble. He was arrested, then released, but it got him on the local TV to start building his legend and reputation as this, anti-communist or pro-communist, depending upon just where in the timeline you are, that started building his reputation as somebody, he's out there, we've got to pay attention to this guy. More recent example, and this is one from my own personal history, way back during that whole Vincent Foster situation, I found within the FBI's own FD 302 paperwork from the interview with Lisa Foster clear evidence of deception and fraud to try and imply that Lisa Foster had identified the gun found with her husband's body in Fort Marcy Park. And when you read the FBI's report, it is obvious it's not the same gun. They're just trying to twist it around. And I took this over to Matt Drudge. We were still friends back then. And I said, we got him dead to rights. We have got them cold on an absolute fraud. And Drudge basically said, I can't touch this story, which was exactly the same thing I was getting from my contacts in the news departments at NBC and CBS at the time. We can't touch that. Okay, same exact time period when Matt Drudge is saying, I can't go with a story where we have proven the FBI is engaging in fraud in the Vince Foster case. Drudge runs a story accusing White House aide Sidney Blumenthal of spousal abuse. Drudge retracts the story 24 hours later. Sidney Blumenthal sues. It's big news all over the media. Drudge gets appearances on Meet the Nation and all these other talking head shows. He winds up eventually with his own news show on the Fox News Network. And then later on down the road, Blumenthal and Drudge settle the case out of court involving a small payment from Blumenthal to Drudge, and the case just goes away. And the purpose of that whole case wasn't for somebody to sue somebody, but to promote Matt Drudge as the online news source you should be looking at and trusting, and don't pay attention to that Rivero guy who's talking about having evidence of FBI fraud in the Vincent Foster case. And I think this arrest of Adam Kokesh is more of the same thing. It's being used to promote his brand identity in the independent media. He's oppressed, they're arresting him, they're trying to frame him on drugs, they're trying to keep him from having his march, to try and lure more people into supporting his armed march into Washington, D.C. It's a setup, and as I said earlier in the week, I do not view it as a coincidence that the Pentagon has declared they have the authority to intervene in a civil dispute or civil uprising, civil discord, without waiting for a request from the president or the governor of a state. It's not a coincidence. I think that march into D.C., that armed march, they're going with loaded guns into the streets of Washington, D.C. They're going to definitely be met by the D.C. police. That's already been announced. And I think they're going to be met potentially by the Army itself. To crush this march down, they'll have agent provocateurs pulling the trigger just like they did at Kent State. They're going to kill a bunch of people just like they did at Kent State and hope it's going to discourage the rest of America from continuing to stand up and say this nation is going in a wrong direction. And I think this whole ginned-up arrest of Adam Kokesh is just there to get his name out there on the independent media. It's a publicity stunt. And somehow the case will be resolved or thrown out of court so that Kokesh can lead his march in on July 4th. That's what I think is going on. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Clint in Costa Rica. Aloha, Clint. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, how you doing?
Doing fine.
The other day when you was coming up for a new name with Obama, and
yes,
somebody got to Scary Barry before I did.
Yes. Actually, a lot of people sent that one in.
Yeah. I was thinking of an idea that a lot of my friends really like the idea of when you had that little lie detector next to Obama on the TV,
mm-hmm,
and, almost everything he says is on a flashing red. I was wondering if you might, put together YouTube videos during the Cripplegate affairs and, post them up, when they commit perjury and whatnot. And
that's a good idea. I should be doing that. I should definitely do that. And maybe I'll try and get it because we've got the video of the replay where Lois Lerner is in there saying, I've taken the fifth, I'm not going to testify, and of course I imagine she's under a lot of stress anyway, but it will be interesting to see how the stress fluctuates up and down with that. It's a good idea. That's a very good idea.
Holder, when he says he don't know, I thought that would have been a perfect deal.
That would have been a perfect opportunity. You're right. I should use that. I mean, this gizmo is still working. You can't even find these anymore. They sort of came and went. I guess politicians are really unhappy at the idea of people having voice stress analyzers to put next to the TV during campaign season. But it really does work. It's a lot more accurate than a polygraph.
Videos.
I'm sorry?
I think that would make some great YouTube videos.
Yeah, let me look into doing that a little bit more. That's a really good idea.
Okay. Have a good one, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. All righty. Let's see. Phone lines are open again here. Over in the European Union, we all know about the hardships the people of Cyprus are having to deal with. We're understanding about how savers all across Europe are going to have these haircuts or scalpings or castrations, whatever you want to call it. And yet we're finding out that members of the European Parliament in Brussels are living high on the hog. They are making 740% more, 7.4 times more than the average European Union citizen. And they get free haircuts and free gasoline and all these other perks, which, considering how poorly they have managed the European Union for the people of Europe, seems a little excessive. I think in the blueprint for the new America, we ought to find ways to tie the financial compensation of all officials to the overall performance of the country, not of Wall Street. Like it is now, where the better Wall Street does, the richer our politicians become. We need to have our politicians and officials' compensation tied to the average wages and salaries of the American people. That's really what we need. And I think we should have blind financial trusts for all elected officials and all appointed officials. And if they don't want to live with that, go find another line of work. Now, proving that not all rich people are evil, and we've talked before about people like Steve Jobs and James Cameron, especially James Cameron. I admire the man greatly for the wonderful movies he's made and for what he has done with his wealth in terms of oceanographic exploration. You know, it's hard not to like the guy. It really is, and I admire him greatly. That's capitalism. When you go out and you make a product or an entertainment or a service or something that people voluntarily give you their money for, that's what capitalism is supposed to be. And there's another gentleman you need to start paying attention to. His name is Jamie Johnson. He's 27 years old. He's a filmmaker. And he is also the heir to the Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical fortune. He is rich. And he starts out saying, I know I'm lucky. But he has had apparently his Buddha on the road moment where he is looking at the ultra-wealthy in the United States. And he made a video called The 1%. We have it linked to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, and you need to look at it to show just how completely disconnected from real America that 1% is. And this guy went to NYU. He studied filmmaking. He did a documentary for HBO called Born Rich in 2003. It was nominated for an Emmy Award. This guy is really good, and he admits he's part of the 1% by inheritance. But he sees the wealth disparity as a major problem that is bad for the country as a whole. So again, his name is Jamie Johnson. And the video he's got out now is The 1%. And this is a guy where, yeah, he's rich, but he sees the problems with the current system. And he's using his money to basically go out there and say there needs to be some adjustments. So we need to pay attention to this guy. Going to go back to the phones here. Bob in California. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hi, are you there? You're on the air. Okay, I guess. Hello, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Oh, this is Robert from Missouri.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the word California in my little. It's that gosh darn hamster in the control room again. They're not feeding him enough vitamins. Anyway, Bob, what's on your mind?
I was wanting to call in and respond to the lady that was talking about Mr. Kokesh, and I've done some digging into his father, Charles Kokesh,
yes,
an indicted vulture capitalist type guy. And then Kokesh being in the Marine Corps, I'm a former Marine, and he was with a civil affairs group, which has to do with winning hearts and minds and handing out bundles of my cash.
So he's a propagandist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, you know, I would just like to warn people, don't, you know, this guy, he's got some real shady things going on with him, and anybody that would follow him in some sort of armed march somewhere has got a screw loose, or they're not doing their research, you know. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Anybody that's thinking about joining that, you've got to be a really big fool. And I think he's a controlled opposition on your libertarian wing. You got the Schumers and the Feinsteins and the Bloomberg grunt.
All right. Well, let me pull back here a little bit, and thank you very much for the phone call here. There is nothing that we can do to stop Kokesh from having his little parade, and there's nothing we can do to stop the people who have already decided who are going to follow him on this misadventure. My goal with the petition is to give a voice to the vast, overwhelming majority of gun owners and Second Amendment supporters in the United States who think this is a bad idea. Because when Kokesh and his group march into Washington, D.C., and they're met by the police, possibly by the Army, all it's going to take is a couple of agent provocateurs to pull the triggers and turn this into a bloodbath. And the whole point of that is the government will then go out and say, see, these gun owners and Second Amendment people, they're all violent extremists, they're all kooks, they're all dangerous, we must take their guns away. And so what we need to do between now and July 4th is we need to get as many signatures on this petition or other petitions just like it that simply say, I am a gun owner, I'm a Second Amendment supporter, I do not support this armed march into Washington, D.C. It is unnecessary, it is a dangerous and reckless provocation. And we need to get that message out to the American people that Kokesh and his marchers do not, in fact, represent or speak for the majority of the nation's gun rights advocates. We need to get that message out there. We need to pull the propaganda rug out from Kokesh and his little stunt. Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I just think that, you know, I don't want to sound, you know, like a crazy anti-Jewish person here. I do not.
Well, then don't. My advice is not to. And I know I've already gotten tons of emails saying you're opposed to Kokesh because he's Jewish and you're a Jew hater and everything like that. Actually, I didn't even realize he was Jewish until I got that mail. I am opposed to his actions and the possible consequences. And whether he's Jewish, Buddhist, or Methodist is irrelevant to the discussion. Okay? So we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much. And getting back to the point that Bob was making here, Kokesh's father has been in legal trouble. He is currently facing a major investigation by the SEC. And it could very well be that Kokesh was approached and said, look, if you go through with this thing and help us get this little bloodbath so we can grab all the guns, the SEC case against your father will magically go away because the SEC isn't all that committed to these prosecutions. They let Bernie Madoff get away with his scam for 12 years before they finally cracked down. So it's all machinations here. And again, I'm very alarmed at the Pentagon's announcement that they have the right to intervene in civil disturbances without waiting for the president or the governor to request it. It is a complete violation of posse comitatus, and it is not a coincidence they announced it here in the run-up to Kokesh's little stunt. Now, meanwhile, we're getting a story over here at Ex-Republic TV. Apparently, the FBI has now retracted that story regarding Ibrahim Todashev down in Florida. They have basically backed off, saying that this kid attacked the FBI, and that was why the FBI had to shoot and kill him. They're now saying it's unclear what happened. Sounds to me like somebody saw the altercation, even though it was at midnight, and there's already contradictions to the story that this guy just attacked him for no reason. So they're already backing off, saying this kid attacked them. We don't know why he was shot. Yeah, I think the reason he was shot is he was telling the FBI something that undermined the official story of the Boston bombing, that undermined the efforts to try and link the Tsarnaev brothers to this triple drug murder. And now we're seeing all this wet work going on. Reader wrote in and said, if you remember when Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was arrested at the boat, and there were these two FBI agents, and one of the FBI agents were saying that the throat wound to Tsarnaev was a knife wound, not a bullet wound, which at the time the official story was that Tsarnaev had attempted to shoot himself, to commit suicide. Then it came out he didn't even have a gun. And at the time, the other official near the FBI agent shot him a dirty look, like he was saying something that shouldn't have been there. And the question is now being asked if that FBI agent who made that interview was one of the two who dropped out of that helicopter. So, anyway, meanwhile over in Great Britain, and they're already rerunning this whole thing about terror attack and beheading in Woolwich, and inevitably the House of Lords is screaming that it's time to revive and push forward the Internet monitoring bill. We've got to listen to all the online communications so we can spot these things before they happen, which never occurs. And by the way, David Cameron's already come out and said that the suspect in this beheading was known to the security services all along. Just like it's come out that the Tsarnaev brothers were somehow involved in U.S. intelligence agencies prior to this Boston situation. So it's just getting murkier and murkier. And I think the good news is that under the press of time and panic, these hoaxes and frauds, they don't have time to plan them carefully and set them up. And the mistakes are beginning easier and easier to spot. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the spin cycle is definitely in full tilt rock and roll afterburner mode here. Apparently over at the Thom Hartmann show on Free Speech TV, Hartmann is going on and on about how the long delays in the nonprofit applications for conservative groups wasn't the result of targeting. It's just because the poor Internal Revenue Service is horribly understaffed and overworked. Well, if that were true, then liberal groups' applications for nonprofit status would have been equally delayed right alongside those of conservatives. But they weren't. Remember, the nonprofit run by Obama's half-brother got their approval for tax-exempt status in just 30 days. So they're definitely out there trying to basically, it's the spaghetti approach. Any story out there and see what gets traction. And again, this approach to propaganda, trial balloon, reject, undermines the credibility of the government as a whole. For propaganda to work, it has to present a clear, unified picture of the desired illusion. And when you have too many market research companies, public relations companies, advertising companies saying, let's try this, that didn't work, let's try that, it undermines the credibility of the whole system because you're not presenting the public with a clear, unified picture. Filmmakers call it losing the narrative. It's exactly what happened. Now then, we're seeing more and more stories coming out about this hoax terror attack in Great Britain. The BBC has identified the ranter in the video as a gentleman named Michael, let me see if I can pronounce this correctly, Adebayo. He's a British citizen of Nigerian descent. One wonders where he got that accent. He was born into a Christian family but supposedly converted to Islam. And a reminder, devout Muslims do not wear gold, and they do not wear wedding rings. And this guy in the video has a gold ring on his hand. It's a fraud. Now, as I said, following this staged incident, there was this very nationalist British group, conveniently in black ski masks, starting to riot. Their agenda supposedly is hate all Muslims, get Muslims out of Great Britain, Britain for the British people. And now apparently London's riot police are in the streets. This is being fanned up to massive riots to justify a clampdown. As I said before the commercial break, the House of Lords is screaming they need complete Internet surveillance in Britain, just like they have over in the United States of America. And again, what Boston should tell us, even if we accept the official story of the Boston bombing, and I do not, it shows us that all of this surveillance, spying, TSA, crotch-grabbing, looting our luggage, TV cameras everywhere, reading our email, scanning our social media, none of it worked. Not one bit. Going to take a break for station identification, and sometime in the third hour, John Stadmiller is going to be joining us about our ongoing fundraising at RBN. We'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to hour number 3 of our show, and joining us on the microphone right now is John Stadmiller, and John, take it away. John, are you there? Okay, I guess we don't have John yet. Oh, no, there you are. There you are.
I'm running around taking and changing hats, Michael.
I know the feeling. I've got like 4 computer screens and a lot of way too many buttons and switches here in this room.
Well, hopefully things will go easier in the future for you. Time will dilate and slow down, and we can live life at full measure.
Anyway, tell us all what's going on with our little fundraising drive for Republic Broadcasting.
Well, I have some good news here. I just had Julie here do the totals here, and we're at, out of the $25,000 we're looking to have pledged in-house by the end of the month, we're at $13,112.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And the breakdown, and it's pretty even across the board. We were doing the pledge for the 1,000 silver rounds. Some people are doing it by credit card or PayPal. As of, $2,125 by mail. They've sent silver, and one gentleman sent in a couple of ounces of gold, and I really do appreciate that. That was $48.50. Credit cards, $21.95, and PayPal, $39.42. So we're about a little better than halfway to our goal, and we still have about a week left on this pledge drive. So, folks, if you have not donated yet, we're gonna be bringing you some bombastic programming. I just got off the horn with Richie Mack, and Richard Mack has committed to come on to the network. We've been talking to Larry Pratt and GOA people. They're coming on as well. We're going to build a strong Second Amendment and a strong constitutional Sheriff's Association and members that's tied to Oath Keepers. So we're going to be building something that people can come to and join, be a part of, help spread the word. It's high time. I wish this was going on 10 years ago, but it's happening now. Better late than never. So we need folks out there that feel that we are indispensable in what we are doing and helping to educate people, reacquaint them with our form of government. Not the world's greatest democracy, Michael. It is a republic, a limited, constitutionally limited republic based on common law, not this witchery and witchcraft that we've seen being passed as laws, rules, regulations. And, God, I just lose my breath trying to chase it and keep up with it.
Well, there's no question that we have long ago, very slowly, so we weren't noticing that we've lost our constitutionally limited republic. We are definitely in a stage of absolute fascist economic dictatorship, and it does seem to be heading to a point of crash. And our task right now, of course, is for we, the American people, to be fully prepared to know exactly what kind of a new government we want, so that we don't have some carpetbagger coming on in and saying, I got a brand new government for you, just sign your name right here on the dotted line, and they'll just start the same scams all over again. And getting back to the issue of the financial support and why it's so necessary, nobody involved with RBN is getting rich. There are far easier ways to make more money than what we're doing here. But we're committed to this very important task. The money is needed to grow the audience, to get into more on-air affiliates, and to replace equipment, which you know the quality of gear that is sold to the prosumer level. It does not last. It's constantly wearing out and breaking down and has to be replaced. Planned obsolescence. We got to take a break for commercials. John, I presume you'll be with us when we come back from these words from our sponsors?
I wouldn't miss it, Michael. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll be right back after these few. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're talking with John Stadmiller about the current fundraising program here at Republic Broadcasting, and this is really very important, especially right now, because right now the money junkies are spending literally billions of dollars through the corporate media and online propagandists trying to sell you a new world war. So it's going to come down to this question of how much are you willing willing to spend to try and stop one. We understand our society is corrupted by big money influence. The lust for those pieces of paper with ink on them seems to have superseded all other considerations in our society. It's destroying what's best about our human nature. And we understand that the only way to get this big money corruption out of our society is for the little money to all stand up and unite in the cause of restoration of the Republic. And it's not going to take a lot from each one of you. If everybody listening to this broadcast sent in just $5, the amazing amount of ability and capability it would bring to Republic Broadcasting to get the message out would be hard to predict just how influential that would be. John?
Well, and Michael, I've just been amazed and impressed by the listeners that we have out there. We have professionals. We've got doctors, we've got lawyers, we've got police officers, we've got blue-collar workers, we've got the candle makers and the bakers out there, everybody. This programming appeals to such a broad section of society. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes here just to give you an idea. I got some letters recently and some nice donations. These were both donations, I believe, for $300 a piece. The one says, please find and enclose my check for $300 as a contribution to your fine patriotic programming on Republic Broadcasting. Your programs are constantly in my home, and my wife and my son are ardent listeners as I am. Back about 5 years ago, you enlightened me and made me realize that my life had been one big lie up to that point. Why? Because I was educated in government public schools and thereafter indoctrinated by the lamestream media. Please send me 100 business cards. Well, we're going to send you more than that, Bruce. And some bumper stickers. He says the one I have on my car is so weather-beaten and faded it's hardly legible. Ditto for the one on my pickup truck. And he says, also, I've been paying for the archives for several years and will continue to access them, so please stay on the air. I'll continue to support you through periodic contributions. And on the note that you made about the donation, folks, you can sign up for our archives for $5.99 a month. That'll give you complete and total access at your listening leisure, total recall at your given choice, any program you want to listen to at any given time. That's a way that you can support if you only have a few bucks. But if you've got a little bit more than that, we need it right now. Jimmy sends me this, and I thank you for this. He said, Dear John, please find enclosed a contribution to RBN. I really love RBN and want the network to continue to operate for freedom and liberty, loving Americans like myself. He says, you're my favorite of all the program hosts. You're very wise and level-headed. I also like listening to many of your other hosts. And that's the point. We have variety. We have people like you, Michael, that, I still to this day, I find it fascinating the amount of time that you put in prep for your program. And you do 3 hours nonstop. And I've never heard you stumble. I don't think I've ever even heard you stutter.
Well, you're not listening too closely then, because I've done both. But well, the coffee keeps me going.
Not on a consistent basis, that's for sure. But a lot of people out there love your show. A lot of people love my show. And there are many shows with different angles, and we're constantly improving the network. We're adding more radio stations. We are in the middle of a damn depression, and I don't have to report that to people. They're fully aware of that. But it's times like these that we need programming such as this. We cannot leave this go. Many of the other alternative networks are either gone or in serious trouble, and we don't plan to do that. Our 9th anniversary is coming up June 4th of next month. We will be on air for 9 years, and we want to be around for a lot longer than that. Building what we need to build, Michael, and that is simply this, is a venue for people that can come and listen and learn and, more importantly, participate. So this is a labor of love. From my aspect, it is a necessity. It's more than that. It's an absolute. So we're going to ask people again to consider donating generously. We're over a little halfway past our mark here. As I said, we've got commitments of $13,112.06. I don't know how the 6 cents came in, but we're over halfway there. We need to reach 25 grand by the end of the month, and that gives us roughly 10 days. So this is what I need you to do, folks. You can call in to the network, make your pledge at 800-724-2719. There's folks to answer the phones right now. The staff will be here for a little while longer. Or just send us a check or a money order or FRNs wrapped in foil. We don't care, to keep the prying eyes of the postal employees out of your business and ours. And here's our address. Simply put, RBN 2251 Double Creek Drive. That's 2251 Double Creek Drive, Suite 302. Round Rock, 2 words, and there really is a Round Rock here in Texas. Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Or go to the PayPal, republicbroadcasting.org. Right at the top it says Donate. Hit that button, it'll take you to PayPal. Or we'll take credit cards. But we're on a pledge for silver. Did you buy silver at $5-10 a round? We'll take silver rounds right now. So any way that you want to do this, call the network, mail it in, donate by PayPal, however you can do it. We're a little way past half of our goal, and I thank so many of you. I'm kind of hesitant of naming names and dollar amounts because a lot of the people want to remain anonymous. They're a part of this, but they want to be the silent partner and the supporter and the spreader of the word of Republic, and we so gratefully acknowledge you. Without you, a lot of this wouldn't be possible. This is for everybody. This is your station. This is like family.
There is one more reason why now is the time that you might want to consider maybe buying one less 6-pack of beer for the upcoming holiday weekend and sending the money into Republic Broadcasting. Right now, because of Triplegate, the credibility of the federal government is perhaps at its weakest that it has been in a long time. And a lot of Americans, judging by the poll numbers that we're seeing, a lot of Americans are starting to turn away from the Orthodox revealed dogma. They're starting to ask the important big questions. And so now is the time for all of us to go out and find those Americans starting to ask questions and guide them here to Republic Broadcasting where they can get the answers they need to have to make good decisions. Remember, Thomas Jefferson said it's the highest duty of every American citizen to keep themselves fully informed so they can make good choices. And right now, a lot of Americans who up until now have just sort of gone along with whatever the corporate media and the government were telling them are realizing the scale at which they have been lied to. And they're looking around. Where are they going to go to find out the answers to these questions? And we need to be able to just have this outreach, both financially and just by your volunteer effort of going into your workplace and your social groups and saying, you need to go over and listen to what these people are saying. And so that's why it's doubly important that right now we get as much of your support as we can, because now is the time to push. Think of us as the invading hordes laying siege to the castle of Washington, D.C., and there are already these huge breaches in the wall. And we've got these trebuchets all set up, ready to fling the truth into Washington, D.C. We need your help to get more of those big round rocks that we put in the sling to fling in there to get our message across.
Well, and just as an example, today on today's program, coming up right after yours, Michael, at 4 o'clock Central Time, we're going to have Sheriff Richard Mack on. He has been doing an excellent job for all of these years, and they're now starting to get on a roll, and I'm talking a big roll with bringing county sheriffs in, educating them, reacquainting them with their oath of office in the Constitution to be in support of the people rather than in law enforcement against them. These are the people that have been doing this for a number of years. Richard Mack is committed to come on to the network and do a program as well. So we're building here, folks. We are building a nexus of concerned, activist people that understand and know and love what their country is supposed to be, and they're all part of this restoration project. You be a part of it too. We want to be there. We want to be the center of activity and start to bring this together to give it full force to reclaim this great country. They've got us beaten and battered and kind of bent over backwards, but we will and can rebuild, and we can get rid of these ne'er-do-wells. The beautiful thing about this, Michael, is the Constitution Constitution declares that we, the people, we are the government. I don't know where these people will come from, what planet or what school of Marxist education they come from, but what I'm looking at in offices, both in federal and state, these people need to go. When the people are educated, they understand the basis of what the law and what the country is about. We can start to demand and force these ne'er-do-wells out, and we can get this country back. It belongs to us. We want it back.
We need to basically remind them that they're supposed to be civil servants, not civil masters. We have a caller on the line to talk about donations. Mark in Florida. Going to have to be really quick. We're going to have to take you to the commercial break, but you can start right now.
Good afternoon. I listened to your show yesterday, and at the end of the show, I went and looked at my PayPal account, and I had all of $6.30 in there. And so I promptly went over and I donated $5. Now, the reason that's significant to me, and I'm not making this up, I'm living on about $300 a month. I know people that spend more than that on groceries. If I can do that, and what you said is brilliant. You know, if everybody listening to this show can go to the site and donate $5 stinking, John's problems are solved before the end of the hour.
All right.
That's simple, folks.
All right. Mark, thank you very much. We got a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And basically what we're asking for is, as we go into this holiday weekend and we think about America and what it is, maybe have one less six-pack of beer, maybe one less pizza. It's actually going to be healthier for you anyway, and just send that money. There's no such thing as a minimum contribution to Republic Broadcasting. John, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and thank you, Mark. I mean, this is a sacrifice on this man's part. You heard him say it's $6 and something in his PayPal, and he sent us $5. Well, and years ago we tried. We figured, if everybody that listened to the network just sent in $5 a month, hey, we would be just fine. But for some reason, people didn't want to do that. They didn't want to be bothered with it, or they forgot to do it. But if you listen to people like Mark, he is dedicated. He's committed to this network and its continuation. There are people out there that are a little bit more well-heeled. And in relationship to what you're worth or your income, what are we worth to you? So generously donate to the network. We don't like doing these pledge drives. I think I've done 4 of them in the last 3 years. And there will come a day that we will have enough radio stations. I talked to you, Mike Rivero, about this. We got a station out in L.A. We just have to have the XDS hooked up to the network so they can pick you up. But that's one of the largest markets in the country. We will continue to grow and put on radio stations with fine hosts like yourself. But from time to time, we need donations. Well, as I said, we're in the middle of this depression, and it's not easy for anybody. We have fixed costs per month. We don't have people that make us deals. You've got to pay to play, and if you don't pay, you don't get to play on the air. So it's as simple as that. This is part of the reason that we are all here, folks, because we are committed. We love this country. We hate the evil that's all around us equally, that's for sure. And I am of the opinion, Mike, that we can defeat this. We can restore the republic, and we can get on with the most important, the gift of living life. Because we only have one go-around with this deal.
That's absolutely true. And again, to just sort of sum up and wrap up this whole thing, right now, all the money junkies, the big money players, are spending millions and billions of dollars to sell this nation a new war, potentially a nuclear war. And the time has come to ask yourself, what are you willing to spend to stop them? And there's only a few of those money junkies. And if we have 300 million Americans all stand up and contribute to shout them down, we can stop this war dead in its tracks. And right now is the opportunity. With all these scandals hitting Washington, D.C., and all the lies coming out about the wars, the American people are starting to listen to the independent media. We actually have a larger audience than the corporate media. We don't have the corporate media's money, because the money is still going into the corporate media to sell you what the corporations want you to think and what the government wants you to think. And we're out here to tell you what you need to know.
We are growing, and they are shrinking. More and more people are walking away from mainstream media. People are even figuring out that Fox, supposedly the conservative network, are nothing but a bunch of neocons in perpetuity of war. We don't need any more idiocy. We need peace. We need security. We need real money. We need real jobs. And we need a real chance to live our lives in our measure, not running and hiding from them. Enough of this stuff. Folks, let me one more time give you the different ways that you can donate to the network. The quickest is to pick up the phone and dial 800-724-2719. Make that call right now. Or you can go to our website, republicbroadcasting.org. Many of you are listening to the network right now. Go to the home page, click on that donate button. There's a PayPal. You can send us a check or money order, in the mail. Our address is just simply right, RBN 2251 Double Creek Drive, Suite 302, or just put number 302 on it, Round Rock, Texas 78664. You can do it that way as well. If you've got some silver rounds in a drawer that you bought at $4.50 or $7.50 a piece, we can use those. We can cash them in right away and pay some bills. And again, folks, we are a little past halfway point with our pledge drive. We are only asking the minimum from you folks out there to pay the bills necessary to keep implementing and plugging stuff into the network for greater growth and greater awareness out there of our fellow Americans. We're about 13 grand and some change. We need 25 by the end of the month. So vote your conscience. Vote with some contributions to the network. We need you. We're family, and we will prevail in this if we all stick together. Thank you, Michael Rivero.
You're welcome there, and I agree. We are winning the war for the minds of America, which is why we can't stop now. We can't slow down. Now's the time to really, really push to get on out there. This is the People's Radio Network. We're serving the people. We don't have huge corporate sponsors. We don't get checks from shadowy non-governmental organizations. We're supported by the public. We are operating truly in the public's interest, even more so than many media outlets that claim to be public radio and public TV. All right, we're coming up on another commercial break here. We'll be back here with more news and more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And isn't it kind of interesting that Lois Lerner is out there before the Congress invoking the Fifth Amendment when the IRS was targeting organizations that support the Bill of Rights? Kind of a little historical irony we ought to keep in mind that's going on. Now, over in Great Britain, another gentleman, Anjan Choudhury, described as a hate preacher. He's a Muslim. He's evil. Described as the hate preacher by the Daily Mail, is calling the alleged Woolrich killer a man of impeccable character, and is warning there will be more lone wolf attacks by Muslims as long as British troops remain in Afghanistan. There's only one slight problem with this piece of propaganda. It's already known that this Anjan Choudhury is connected to British intelligence. So this is an attempt to fan up anti-Muslim sentiment in Great Britain, the same way that Nazi Germany was fanning up anti-Jewish sentiment. Same stunt. They might even try the same thing here in the United States of America, spectacular beheading by an evil Muslim, and try and get riots going that way, especially as more and more people stand up and say they don't support Adam Kokesh's armed march into Washington, D.C. These guys aren't going to quit. They're going to be looking for something else. All right, the armed march thing isn't going to work. We've got to do something else. I guarantee you, right now, the United States government wants a violent uprising in the United States of America that they can mercilessly, brutally crush as an example to everybody. That's what they know how to deal with. They've been buying up hollow point bullets and armored cars and all the rest of that. What the federal government cannot deal with, what they are unprepared to deal with, is an educated and aware American people standing up as one nation, one people, saying we will not be the wallets of last resort for Wall Street's crimes and corruptions any longer, and shout that message to the world. That's what the Occupy movement was doing, saying we're not going to pay. We're not responsible for these Wall Street bozos and their mortgage-backed security fraud, and we're not going to pay it any longer. And the rest of the world is listening. Foreign investment in the United States is off by something like 1/3. Treasury bonds, nobody's buying those any longer. When there's a Treasury bond bubble, and the Federal Reserve is buying most of them. It's sort of this incestuous back and forth of worthless paper, trying to create the illusion that this system is still working. And the government understands they can't keep it up forever. It's all going to come crashing down. We're seeing the red warning signs just in the collapse of the Japanese bond market. The Treasury bonds will be next. Stock market is stuttering despite $80 billion of liquidity poured in every month by the Federal Reserve. And if it all comes crashing down, the U.S. government, they're looking for somebody to blame or something to distract from it. Because that's what happened the last two times. Crash of 1907, get out of it with World War I. Crash of 1929, get out of it with World War II. Crash of 2008, and they're pushing as hard as they can to get these wars going. If they can't get the war, they want somebody to blame. Oh, it's the Iranian, Chinese, Korean, Al-Qaeda hackers that crashed the American banking system. These people in Washington, D.C. are not responsible human beings. They are not going to stand up and say, yeah, we messed this up really, really badly, and I resign. They take credit for anything good that comes along, whether they had anything to do with it or not. And anything bad happens, they blame somebody else. The imaginary playmate in the sky, his will, or somebody else's fault. They're looking for somebody to blame for their own failings. They're trying as hard as they can to get this stuff going. And we're seeing the same thing over there in Great Britain with this obvious hoax killing, and now these masked nationalists starting riots, and the riot police are in the streets, and now we've got this known British intelligence asset out there screaming, there are going to be more of these killings. They want riots so they can declare a national emergency and martial law. House of Lords is already out there saying, well, this justifies having total surveillance on everything that's in Britain, email or phone or anything like that. They're pushing as hard as they can to lock the gate on you. And now is the time for you to push back. Are you going to be human beings or are you going to be sheep? Time to decide. We've been talking before about all of these individuals within the military who are in positions of dealing with issues of sexual harassment, who themselves are being arrested for sexual harassment. And now it's reached a new peak because Tuesday, Brigadier General Brian Roberts, 29-year Army veteran, was suspended from his post at Fort Jackson Army Base in South Carolina over allegations of adultery and a physical altercation. Now, if you were going to start firing people in the government over adultery, half the government would be gone overnight. And I know there's a huge problem with sexual assault in the military. Probably it's linked in with all these people on SSRIs just going on impulse and not thinking about whether it's right or wrong. But this guy, this is the commander of this training camp. And I'm wondering if, like Petraeus, he's being gotten rid of for reasons other than his private life. So we want to keep an eye on that one. We're talking about our school system and how it just seems dead set on indoctrinating our children to just stay where they are, not do anything, not think, just canto and respondu, accept what you're told, repeat it back, indoctrination here. And apparently there is another scandal over here in North Carolina where 7 teenage high school students were arrested for throwing water balloons. Now, I understand water balloons are not a lot of fun for the people being hit by them, but it's a water balloon. And they arrested the kids. It must be wonderful to live in South Carolina where the police don't have anything else to do but come in and arrest high schoolers. A week from summer vacation, yeah, they're going to be high-spirited and there's going to be hijinks. I saw that when I was a school kid. We played pranks, harmless pranks. Nobody came in and arrested us. By the way, there's a video on the website. The headline is, I care more about the people my students become. And it's a video made by this teacher who is resigning from the school over how she sees the school administration managing education. And a lot of what she says very much was my experience when I briefly taught high school remedial math many years ago. Wasn't my experience at the University of Hawaii when I was teaching visual effects and animation. That was a very good, positive experience. And the only reason I quit that is I was working on Lost at the time, and there wasn't enough Michael to go around, and I had to let it go. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the kids. I enjoyed the other teachers, and that was a good time. But when I was teaching at the high school level, what I experienced from the administration is very much like this teacher. Now, there is a positive end to this story about this 16-year-old honor student. Remember, she was conducting a demonstration for her fellow students involving a bottle. It was probably carbon dioxide and water, and there was a boom, and she was expelled from her school, and they arrested her and charged her. Nobody was harmed. It was a science demonstration. Now, the charges have been dropped. Okay, but the school says we will not have her back. And as of today, it doesn't matter. Because this 16-year-old honor student who did this experiment now has a full scholarship to the U.S. Space Academy. So she's going up to the top levels of technical education in our society. And this all came about because of this NASA veteran who himself, as a teen, was accused of starting a forest fire during a science experiment. It was a false accusation. And they actually made a movie about this story. It's called Red October. And it's about this kid who just was living in coal mining country where everybody says, you know, this is your life. You will be a coal miner. Your father's a coal miner. Your grandfather's a coal miner. That's all you've got to look forward to. And this kid took it upon himself. And this is in the days before Estes model rocketry, where you could just go buy a model rocket and fire it off. If you were going to fly rockets, you built them all yourself from scratch. And this kid built rockets and was setting them off and went through this horrible thing where there was a forest fire that was blamed on him. And it ultimately came out that somebody with a marker flare had started the fire. And he was exonerated, and he went on to win a science fair with his rockets and wound up working for NASA designing the solid boosters that flew the shuttle into space. So the movie is called Red October. That guy is the one who got this 16-year-old honor student a full scholarship to the U.S. Space Academy. So now this girl can go back to the school that just kicked her out and said, fine, you kicked me out. I'm going to be a space scientist, and you're all still teachers. And good for her. Absolutely. And the message there is that if you are a student and you're going to accomplish anything in this world, you're going to have to break outside the box that the school builds around you. And I know I went through this myself. When I went to Cal State Fullerton, and I was in a graduate level course on theater history, and I did this term paper that was about theater tech before American influence. Second section was American contributions to theater tech. And the third section was where we are going from here. And I talked about how microcomputers were coming along, and there were going to be computer-controlled stage lighting and computer-controlled flying systems, and one day computers would put pictures right on motion picture film. This was back in the 1970s. My professor called it a load of nonsense and gave my term paper an F because the third section wasn't footnoted. And I said, it can't be footnoted. This is where I think we're going. And the teacher said, oh, no, you can't be thinking on your own. We're here to create more teachers. You will footnote and research. You will recapitulate what has already gone on before. Don't you dare think originally. And I walked out of Cal State Fullerton at that point. And I took that term paper over to CBS Television City. And on the basis of that term paper, I got hired to design some of the first-generation computer-controlled scoreboards for game shows. I worked for Mark Goodson and Bill Todman. And eventually I wound up going to work for Robert Abel and Associates and for Apogee. And the first time I got nominated for an Academy Award for Visual Effects, I took that letter right back down to Cal State Fullerton, and I waved that at the department chairman. And I said, to that professor who'd flunked me, and I said, if you'd flunked me, I'd be a teacher today. And here I am now, an Academy Award nominee. Didn't win, still have that large empty space on my mantelpiece. But that's the point of this story that we're seeing. Our schools are not preparing children to excel in the future. They are holding them back in the quest for political correctness and conformity. And they're trying very hard to send the message, don't do anything, don't think. And that's not how you prepare children to be world leaders or national leaders. That's how you prepare them to be sheep. That's how you prepare them to be obedient soldiers, obedient consumers, obedient debt slaves. And if you're a kid in school right now and you want to break out and make something of your life, the first thing you got to realize is that box that's built around you by that education system is your worst enemy. Anyway. Up in Pennsylvania, Judge Mark Ciavarelli Jr. has been sentenced to 28 years in prison for literally selling juvenile offenders into the privately owned corporate prison system. Because the more people are sent to jail, the more those corporate prisons make from the government. And they were kicking back some to the judge. And he was sending kids to prison for trivial offenses because he was making money off of it. And I'm glad they caught him, and I'm glad they've thrown him in prison for 28 years. But for every one they've caught, how many are continuing undetected? Now, I want to talk about Pope Francis. As you're probably aware, I gave him a gold star, I think it was last week, when he came out basically saying that the entire premise of the financial system of the world is wrong. And he came out and he basically said something that I've been saying when I talk about the public currency as a public utility. And he came out and he said, money needs to be the servant of the people, not its masters. I'm really starting to like this guy. And his points went up even further today when he came out and he said, Christians should accept the good works atheists perform. And even atheists are redeemed by their actions, even if they don't have any faith. And he's trying to basically pull Christianity back from this adversarial attitude of you believe as I believe, or I will come and whack you about the head and shoulders with a large rounded stick. And so I'm really liking this guy. I don't know what he's going to do about the molestation problem. I'm a little alarmed that Pope Benny has moved back into the Vatican to whisper in his ear, but I'm really starting to like this guy. Okay, apparently I said Hunt for Red October on the air, and that's not it. The movie is October Sky, about the scientist, and I had it in my notes here, and I don't know why I transmogrified it. But yeah, the movie is October Sky, about this kid who just taught himself rocketry and was falsely accused of setting a forest fire and became a NASA engineer. And now this guy, and I don't have his name in front of me, I really should, but he is responsible for getting this 16-year-old honor student in Florida a full scholarship to the U.S. Space Academy. So it's a victory for incentive and imagination and initiative in our children. And we've got to reward that, and we've got to applaud it. Because that school system, your taxes very thinly are paying for. It's not about education. It's about indoctrination. It's about enforcing the slavery to the system. And if you're going to accomplish anything meaningful in life, you've got to break away from that. You have to break away from those who control you and say, you can't go there, and you can't do this, and you can't think that. All right, going to go back to the phones here real quick. Casey in Florida. Aloha, Casey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good thoughts, Michael. We got to break the matrix there.
Yes.
Yeah, you brought up, beat me to it. It was October Sky. Excellent movie, and while I was on hold, I've added it back into my queue on Netflix. I'm going to watch it again.
Yes.
Excellent movie.
It is.
Really good. Listen, I've talked a couple times. I've got a new thought or two on the march, the armed march. On your Facebook, there was a gentleman that added this link to a YouTube deal with Kokesh, and I've not been familiar with the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And until this last thing, and you brought this to the forefront, and I've seen him on another network, which they seem to be promoting the thing, and
yep.
I think that's ill-advised. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but gosh, I watched that YouTube video, and it just evokes a lot of thoughts with me, and I don't want to go ad hominem.
Then my advice is not to. We're at a commercial break. This is a setup. I recognize it. We've seen it before. It's a setup, and that's all I can say about it. A lot of harassing on Facebook. It's sort of expected. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the U.S. stock market is now closed. It ended up slightly in the red. And Fox News is going on about how the United States was able to stem this global sell-off that we saw around the world last night, beginning in the Asian markets. The Nikkei lost more than 7% of its value. And it was stemmed, the panic was stemmed by the United States markets, and it's all due to the Fed's stimulus. And I understand the reason they're trying to make that connection to sort of convince the American people that the Federal Reserve's continued creation of $85 billion a month out of thin air to give to Wall Street is a good thing. But it may backflash on them because foreign investors are going to be seeing that report or reading that report and realizing that the problems with the market are not corrected. It's just being propped up with a sudden infusion of instantly created cash. And by the way, during the big crash back in 1929, the House of Morgan tried exactly the same thing. As the market began to dip, they just poured in all of their resources into the stock market to buy stocks and drive the prices back up. And it didn't work because the investors understood the market was being driven up by a sudden influx of cash from the Wall Street firms themselves. So we'll see when the Asian markets open tonight if world investors are going to fall for it or not, or if foreign governments are going to start intervening in the markets to keep it all up again. But they can't keep this juggling act going forever. It's impossible. Following on the comment I was making about Pope Francis trying to basically reduce the tension between believers and non-believers, Secretary of State John Kerry came out and said the freedom to not believe in a religion is effectively a birthright of every human being. And he's absolutely right, because that First Amendment that says there will be no official state religion for the United States of America, that's what it means. Congress shall make no act respecting an institution of religion. Means there's no official U.S. government religion. So that First Amendment not only guarantees you freedom of religion, it guarantees you freedom from religion. That you are not constrained to believe in any particular article of faith. And it's very important to remember that. Okay. Just before airtime today, major quake down near Tonga, magnitude 7.4, no tsunami reported, so we're taking a deep breath about that. Seattle temperatures broke record lows yesterday, and spring is now on track to be the coldest for the last 30 years. So this whole global warming nonsense is just absolutely debunked, and in fact now we're starting to hear, and this is coming in from express.co.Great Britain, scientists are now predicting we're heading into another ice age. They're just making it up as they go along, I swear. They really, really do. Had a collision between a satellite owned by Ecuador and some Russian space junk. Apparently a very minor ding. The satellite's still working, but the GOES-13 weather satellite that monitors the Atlantic seaboard and the Atlantic has quit working just at the start of hurricane season. That's it for our show. We're going to come back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network, getting into the holiday weekend. Please remember to support Republic Broadcasting. We are here for you. We don't serve the corporations. We don't serve the government. We serve the American people and the Republic, and we need your help to do it. See you tomorrow. Aloha, America.